I actually came out to my mother from a pulpit, and which is really an interesting thing. My mother was really interested in knowing the diversity work that I was doing and wanted to come hear me speak at one of these congregations that I was doing this work at. And now my mother, to venture into a non-Catholic church was huge. So it wasn't a Catholic church we were in. So she came. And right before she came, I called her and I said, Mom, I know you've known things. And I think she knew very well who I was. And I said, I know you know things, but I know you're going to hear things that may have not been confirmed for you in the past from my kind of conversation with the community today. I need you to accept this at this point. And if you can't be there, I understand, but I really need you to accept it, or I think, I'm more than open to having this conversation. I think my heart was beating full fast, and I didn't know if she was going to come. She ended up coming that day. She brought my older sister and my brother-in-law, who are also very super Catholic, and my nephew and my two nephews at that point were in the church. And I think it was being up at that pulpit was probably the hardest thing I think one of the hardest conversations or kind of lecture, sermon kind of things that I've ever had to give, because they were in the front pew. And looking at that, I had no idea what the reaction would be at the end of the conversation. For her to still come after I gave her that phone call was huge for me. But then afterwards, she came up to me. It was like a coffee hour and chat with the congregation. And she came up and she said, "Great job. We didn't really talk about anything gay, but it was okay that she was still talking to me."
Actually, I came out to him by accident, not knowing that MCC had their largest church in Dallas, Texas, and he was in Dallas going to seminary at one of the Southern Baptist schools. And when I said to him, "Hey, I found a new church, it's called MCC and there was like silence on the phone. And I didn't know what that meant, only to come to find out he knew exactly what the church was, and exactly that the church was meant for LGBT community folks. And that was my coming out to him without knowing it. And then on his school break for the summer, he proceeded to come home, came to my house, knocked on the door, had his Bible under his arm, and proceeded to beat me up with what we refer to as the texts of terror. Those 6 or 7 scriptures that you find throughout the Bible that, if taken word for word, just out of context, says that homosexuality is wrong. He would not listen to anything I had to say. Any kind of reply I tried to make, I was told, "You're being brainwashed by that church." It didn't apply to him and what he had learned during his time in a Southern Baptist church.
So I went and talked to her, and I couldn't have found somebody that was more supportive. Mom said, "Gee, why didn't you tell me about this before?" And I said, "Mom, you don't understand. There's guilt that comes with this." She says, "Honey, why would you feel guilty about something you were obviously born with?" And I lost it. There was not enough facial tissue in the house at that moment, because I think I went through 2 boxes because I cried so much, because I just couldn't believe that this woman could accept me like that. And later on I asked her, I said, "Mom, how is it so easy for you to accept me?" She says, "You're my child. What else would I do?" I said, "If you'd have thought it would have been any other way," she said, "you sold me short." I said, "I'm sorry." And I cried again. While we were living in Nebraska, Mother was going to a very conservative, fundamental, non-denominational church. And I had attended with her once and met a friend of hers. And she, usually I found the excuse, I was still not totally happy with God, and had failed to find my place in the church at that point. And about 2 months into transition, we met this woman in the grocery store. After they'd exchanged pleasantries for it, the woman turns and says, "Who's this?" And my mom says, "Well, that's my daughter Joanne." She says, "Oh my goodness." She says, "I knew you had a son named John. I didn't know you had a daughter named Joanne." She says, "Well, they're the same person, and I like her better." So that was the level of acceptance I had from my mother. She actually, I think, liked her daughter better than she ever liked her son. And she loved her son, so that's the level of support I had from her.